Swords have always symbolized strength, courage, and nobility. Some civilizations created them in elaborate styles. Blade length defines its magnitude. Some swords stretch several feet in length, while others are shorter but boast intricate craftsmanship. And then there are those that broke records with their sheer scale, known as the largest swords ever wielded in battle. So join us in today's video as we look at some of the most massive ancient weapons ever made. Hellburners. Well, the term weapons of mass destruction is usually tied to modern warfare, but the roots of such catastrophic devices stretch far back in history. One early and striking example came during the fall of Antwerp in 1585, amid the 80 Years' War, a bitter conflict as the Netherlands fought for independence from Spanish control. It was during this decisive siege that the world witnessed the arrival of the Hellburners, an early incarnation of large-scale explosive weaponry that signaled a major leap in destructive engineering. Conceived by Italian engineer Federico Giambelli, the Hellburners were essentially advanced floating time bombs, built as part of a secret mission backed by Queen Elizabeth I of England. These lethal vessels were designed to break through the blockade imposed by Spanish commander Alexander Farnese, who had ordered the construction of a bridge across the Scheldt River. This structure effectively cut the city off from the sea, crippling its ability to receive essential supplies or reinforcements. Farnese's bridge wasn't traditional. It was composed of a chain of moored ships linked by wooden planks, reinforced with vertical stakes driven deep into the riverbed. Giambelli's answer was a feat of innovation. 2 ships were equipped with massive brick-lined blast chambers, each packed with over 3 tons of premium gunpowder and layered with metal shrapnel, all arranged to direct the full force of the explosion toward enemy defenses. One of the ships, Fortune, used a slow-burning fuse, while the second, Hope, carried a revolutionary clockwork and flintlock ignition system, an early mechanical timer created by a master Antwerp watchmaker. On the night of April 4, 1585, under total darkness, both vessels were deployed behind a fleet of 32 conventional fire ships sent in as decoys. The maneuver worked. While Fortune grounded early and detonated with limited effect, Hope reached the target. Its blast ripped through Farnese's floating bridge, producing a shockwave felt nearly 80 kilometers away. The explosion killed over 800 Spanish soldiers instantly and devastated the surrounding siege operations. Despite the Hellburners' short-lived tactical triumph and the horror they unleashed, Spanish forces rapidly rebuilt the destroyed bridge, and Antwerp finally fell to the siege. Still, this moment marked a turning point in the history of war, showcasing how engineered explosives could shift battlefield power and laying the groundwork for even more destructive inventions that would reshape the face of conflict for centuries to come. It was much worse than Greek fire. The sword of Pier Gerlof's Donia. This is the sword of Pier Gerlof's Donia, a blade made for someone beyond ordinary scale and arguably the most colossal sword ever swung in an actual battle. It belonged to Pier Heronia, a rebel and seafarer from Frisia in the northern Netherlands, whose actions and immense stature cemented his place in legend. Pier was so physically imposing that people simply called him Groot Pier, or Great Peter. Born around 1480, Pier was said to stand nearly 7 feet tall, with such incredible strength that he could allegedly bend a coin using only his thumb and forefinger. Some stories go even further, claiming he once lifted an entire plow with one arm. At 18, Pier lived through Frisia's shift into an autonomous state after a long civil war between the Schieringers and the Vetkopers. Though the Schieringers claimed victory, the Vetkopers kept fighting, leaning on international allies for help. While isolated clashes broke out across the region, Pier found stability. He got married and lived a fulfilling life as a wealthy farmer. That peaceful routine came to a brutal end in 1515, when Pier, now 35, saw everything torn away. A group of Saxon mercenaries known as the Black Band, hired by the Vetkopers, raided his village, murdered his wife, and set his land on fire. Out of that devastation, Pier rose with nothing but vengeance in his bones. What followed was a campaign of fury that made him infamous. He led a pirate militia that hunted down Saxon forces, turning himself into a symbol of mythical retaliation. He became known for swinging a two-handed sword that matched his own height and weighed nearly 16 pounds. It's believed the sword was forged in Germany, possibly taken off a Saxon opponent he had defeated. For context, the standard 16th century Zweihänder, the biggest regular two-handed sword of that period, measured about 4.5 feet and weighed only 4 pounds. Despite the many stories tied to Peer and his enormous weapon, he eventually came to terms with the futility of his mission. He abandoned his rebellious ways and passed away not long after. Doubts have been raised about the authenticity of the sword now preserved in the Fries Museum, with some arguing it might just be a ceremonial bearing sword from the 15th century, too oversized to be practical in real combat. But fresh research from the museum has added weight to the belief that Groot Peer actually used this supermassive sword in battle, giving more substance to the folklore surrounding his life. Heliopolis, the taker of cities. In 305 BC, Demetrius of Macedon launched a siege on the island nation of Rhodes, aiming to sever its alliance with his rival Ptolemy. During the campaign, one weapon in particular struck terror into the hearts of the defenders, the largest siege tower ever constructed. The Heliopolis stood 130 feet tall and 65 feet wide. It was mounted on a platform with 8 wheels, each 15 feet in diameter. The massive 160-ton structure required 3,400 men to manually push it into position, rotating in coordinated shifts. Although not the first of its kind, the Heliopolis was undoubtedly the most ambitious. Reinforced with iron plating and treated for fire resistance, the tower included 2 broad staircases, allowing an unprecedented number of troops to move across its multiple levels and breach enemy fortifications. Nicknamed the Taker of Cities, it was outfitted with 16 catapults capable of hurling projectiles weighing between 30 and 180 pounds. A secondary set of 4 dart launchers and a mechanical drawbridge enabled the rapid deployment of soldiers behind enemy lines. Demetrius's offensive aimed to capture a vital coastal stronghold, dominate trade routes, and assert Macedonian control. The siege, showcasing the technological prowess of Macedonia, also doubled as a power display meant to intimidate surrounding nations. But despite its engineering brilliance, the Heliopolis met an unexpected failure. The defenders of Rhodes flooded the land around the city, turning it into a swamp that made the tower immobile. This tactic forced Demetrius to abandon the campaign and leave behind his prized war machine as a relic of failed conquest. Another version of events claims the Heliopolis was eventually withdrawn after Rhodes' defenders managed to strip off some of its outer armor. In the aftermath, the Rhodians sold the massive structure for scrap. Legend holds that the proceeds funded the creation of the Colossus of Rhodes, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Some sources also suggest the tower's iron plating was melted down and reused in building the statue, while its timber provided scaffolding. Though it didn't secure victory, the Heliopolis demonstrated the scope of what siege engineering could achieve. It sparked the imagination of military architects for generations, influencing future towers designed with battering rams, mechanical lifts, and spear launchers. Demetrius would later employ a smaller version of this movable siege tower in 292 BC to seize the city of Thebes, and it was scary. Basilic Cannon. There are big weapons, and then there is this Holy Father. Constantinople was once the heavyweight of civilization, fortified, unshakable, and wrapped in the kind of walls empires bragged about. But when Emperor Constantine XI was approached by a Hungarian engineer named Orban with plans for a cannon that could level cities, he passed. He believed the legendary Theodosian walls would hold. So Orban crossed the line and went to Mehmed II, the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, and that's where the tables flipped. Given full access to resources, Orban got to work and forged a beast, the Basilic Cannon. It stretched 27 feet long, had a 30-inch mouth, and weighed in at a crushing 20 tons. Decorated with Ottoman flourishes, it wasn't just massive, it was magnificent. This thing could launch stone or iron cannonballs for 1.5 miles. Each one weighed around 1,500 pounds. When it hit, it didn't knock, it erased. 60 oxen and 400 men hauled it to Constantinople. Mehmed didn't just rely on one shot, he came from all sides. 110 ships attacked by sea while his artillery fired from secure positions on land. On April 24, 1453, the basilic let loose 2 rounds. The first shattered the inner wall. The second opened the gate. Ottoman soldiers poured through. Over the next few days, the city was slowly torn apart, stone by stone, nerve by nerve. The basilic didn't just destroy structures, it shredded morale with every thunderous blast. After 6 weeks of fire, the cannon was done. But the job was finished. Constantinople fell. Mehmed II took his title as Mehmed the Conqueror, and the basilic cannon became a legend, not just for breaking a city, but because to this day it holds the title the largest caliber cannon ever used in real combat. And without any doubt, it was Warwolf. In medieval warfare, few engines of destruction instilled terror in the hearts of defenders quite like the Warwolf. It was believed to be the largest trebuchet ever constructed. King Edward I of England commissioned this colossal weapon during the siege of Stirling Castle in Scotland in 1304. Edward I, known as Longshanks for his towering build, demanded a siege engine so intimidating that the Scots would be driven to surrender at the mere sight of it. When completed, the Warwolf, or Lupus Garay, may have stood between 300 to 400 feet tall with its throwing arm extended and was capable of hurling enormous 300-pound stones at 120 miles per hour across a vast distance. Designed and built by 5 master carpenters and nearly 50 laborers over the span of 3 months, the Warwolf was said to be capable of destroying any fortress. 30 wagons were used to transport the weapon before it was assembled over 3 months outside Stirling Castle, which at the time was the final stronghold of the Scottish resistance. For 4 months, the English bombarded the fortress using 11 smaller siege engines while the Warwolf was still under construction. According to some historical accounts, the Warwolf was so complex and time-consuming to assemble that the defending forces surrendered before it was even launched. Yet King Edward, eager to see his massive investment in action, refused to allow anyone to enter or leave the fortress until the Warwolf had launched a stone. A Latin chronicle from the era described the Warwolf's single attack, claiming it fired 1 stone through the castle walls like an arrow ripping through cloth. In simple words, it was a weapon of death. Norimitsu Odachi. This colossal blade, known as the Norimitsu Odachi, measures an astonishing 377 centimeters and weighs over 14 kilograms. That might not sound impossible at first until you realize that the average Japanese sword of the same type is only around 60 centimeters long. Which raises the wild question, was the wielder 6 times taller than a normal person? If the average human stands around 5 to 6 feet, that would make the owner of this sword somewhere around 30 to 36 feet tall. This enormous 15th century weapon was crafted from a single slab of steel and is currently housed at the Kibitsu Shrine. Just for the visual, imagine Baby Doll battling a giant samurai in Sucker Punch. It's that energy. Well, it's a monster. Forged in the 15th century by master swordsmith Osafune Norimitsu, it's often associated with giants in local folklore because of its intimidating scale. It's now on public display at Kibitsu Shrine in Okayama Prefecture. Though clearly not made for practical combat, it may have served as a symbol of status, divine protection, or sheer craftsmanship. It's considered an edachi, a category for extremely long curved swords. Its surface showcases a visible grain pattern hata and a refined temper line hamon. It also includes a bowhai and a carved groove to reduce its weight. Despite being unusable in any traditional sense, the Norimitsu Odachi remains a masterclass in historical forging. The Claw of Archimedes. Well, now this is just terrific. I mean, just look at this thing. A painting shows the claw of Archimedes pulling down a Roman ship, turning the old phrase iron hand into something brutally literal. This strange and powerful device was built in the 3rd century BC to defend Syracuse against incoming Roman fleets. It functioned as a giant crane fitted with massive grappling hooks attached by ropes. When enemy ships approached the city walls, the machine's hooks would clamp onto them, hoist them partly out of the water, and then drop them violently back, causing them to capsize. It was hidden so effectively that Roman soldiers believed they were up against gods, not men. Who came up with it? Well, it was none other than the great Archimedes, the genius put in charge of defending Syracuse by its ruler, Hiero. The claw played a major role during the Second Punic War when Rome brought over 220 quinqueremes to attack the city. And while most siege weapons crush walls, this one made ships vanish. Giant Minoan double axes. The Labres or Minoan double axe is one of the most defining icons of Minoan civilization, symbolizing spirituality, authority, and ancient myth. This unique twin-bladed tool has been discovered in the ruins of palaces, sacred sites, and burial chambers, suggesting its significant place in Minoan ritual life. Unlike other weapons, many surviving Labres pieces look ceremonial, possibly linked to goddess cults, bull sacrifices, or displays of ruling power. But was it solely sacred, or did it serve practical roles in society? The double axe featured heavily in both Minoan rituals and culture. Full-sized versions weren't just tools, they were symbolic offerings placed in shrines or graves. Smaller replicas likely served as votive gifts, some were even pierced to be worn as pendants or charms. Though its precise religious role is still debated, Minoan seals and frescoes regularly portray the axe in ceremonial contexts, often near a female figure. Its image shows up across Minoan artifacts as a symbol on seals, painted on pottery, carved into stones, and written into their script. The small scale and delicate build of this example suggest it was intended as an offering. So what do you think about these creepy ancient weapons? Well, let us know in the comment below. And we always say if you've enjoyed this video, be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more content like this, and be sure to check out our previous video. Thanks for joining us on this journey, and we'll see you pretty soon.